Welcome to the Videntis. We like to go deeper than most, into the most impactful news stories of the day. It's January 20th, 2025. We're just days away from President-elect Trump's second inauguration, and, well, let's just say things are already pretty interesting.
Yeah, no kidding. Seems like we're picking up right where we left off in 24. Lots of folks talking about the new administration, that's for sure.
For sure. Today we've got two stories, both with global implication.
Okay, lay it on me.
First up, we go to the Vatican.
Interesting. Always something going on over there.
Well, this time it's Pope Francis and, you guessed it, President-elect Trump. The Pope is, how do we say this? Not holding back.
Oh, he's known for being outspoken. What's he saying?
He's calling Trump's planned immigration raids a disgrace.
This isn't their first disagreement on immigration. Remember back in 2016?
During the campaign? Yeah.
The Pope said some of Trump's policies weren't, quote, Christian.
Right. And this time it seems like that divide is, well, getting wider.
Yeah, this is more than just a little policy debate. We're talking a direct challenge from one of the most powerful moral leaders in the world.
And the Post didn't mince words. I mean, he flat out said the raids would make the migrants, who have nothing, pay the unpaid bill.
Yeah.
And then he added, it doesn't work. You don't resolve problems this way.
Wow. Strong words. He's been consistent, though, right?
Yeah.
Advocating for migrants since he became Pope back in 2013.
Absolutely. He's spoken out against dehumanizing migrants time and again, called for compassion, understanding, really trying to change the way we approach these challenges.
Makes you think about what all this means, not just for Catholics, but for anyone concerned with what's happening at borders all over the world. I mean, this is a humanitarian crisis.
Absolutely. And this is resonating here in the U.S., too. Cardinal Blase Cupich of Chicago, a leading voice in the American Catholic Church, he's echoed the Pope.
What do you say?
Called the raids an affront to the dignity of all people and communities.
Dissent within the church itself. That adds a whole other layer to this.
It does. And, the Videntis has learned the Trump administration is actually reconsidering the raids because of all the criticism.
Really? Huh. So maybe moral arguments and public pressure do have an effect.
Could be a sign of how he'll approach these kinds of tough issues in his second term.
We'll have to see.
We will. Now, before we jump to our second story, what do you think is most important for our listeners to consider about all this?
I think, well, it's easy to get caught up in the headlines, but we got to look beyond that. There are real people caught in the middle of this. Families, people who are afraid. We got to consider the human cost.
You're right. These policy decisions, they have real-world consequences. And often the people who suffer most are already struggling.
Exactly. This isn't just an American issue either. This is a global challenge, and the ethical questions are the same everywhere. It's a conversation we need to be having worldwide.
Absolutely. Okay, so speaking of conversations with global implications, our next story takes us from the Vatican to, well, American power. President-elect Trump just dropped a bit of a bombshell.
Oh, I gotta hear. What is it this time?
It seems he's ready to open up a whole Pandora's box of, well, historical mystery.
I'm intrigued. Do tell.
So get this. On the eve of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Trump pledges to declassify and release all, and I mean all L, the remaining government records on the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and MLK Jr.
Wow. The timing is interesting, to say the least. Right before a day of remembrance for MLK Jr., whose death, still raises so many questions.
Right. It's a bold move. Trump says it's about transparency, addressing what he calls the overclassification of documents.
Didn't he try this before?
He did. Back in 2017, he tried to release the JFK files.
Right.
But there was pushback from intelligence agencies. He only ended up releasing some of them.
So what makes this time different?
Well, it seems like he's really determined. And, well, there is that new Secretary of Health and Human Services.
You mean Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? He's been pushing for this for a long time, hasn't he?
He has. He's been pretty vocal about it. Believes those files hold key information about his father's assassination.
So maybe Trump found a way around those roadblocks he hit before.
Maybe. Makes you think about the balance of power, between the president and the intelligence agencies. Could set a precedent for future administrations.
No doubt.
And the impact could be huge. Historians, civil rights groups, anyone interested in these events, they're all going to want access to this. Could shed new light on some dark chapters in our history.
But what about the downsides? What if there's information that could harm national security or ruin people's reputations? And will this really give us closure or just fuel more conspiracy theories?
All good questions. We'll have to see how this plays out. But you can bet the Videntis will be following every twist and turn. We'll be bringing you in-depth analysis every step of the way.
I look forward to it.
Now, before we move on, I'd like to ask our listeners, what intrigues you most about this story? What are your initial thoughts and reactions?
This really makes you think about, well, the nature of truth, the power of secrets, and the lasting impact of these events. They still shape our world today.
Well said. And actually, before we move on to some other news, there's a new development on that first story about the immigration raids.
Seems like some folks are already stepping up to help those who might be affected by these raids.
Yeah, Catholic charities organizations are mobilizing, getting ready to provide aid, legal counsel, shelter, basic necessities, that sort of thing.
Wow. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is, putting their resources on the line to help vulnerable communities. I mean, that takes guts, especially with the potential for political blowback.
It does. It's a powerful reminder that even with all the political division out there are people who are committed to human dignity, people who are ready to offer compassion to those in need.
For sure. It's like the administration might be pushing for stricter enforcement, but these groups are trying to, well, soften the blow, make sure people's basic rights are protected.
It's like David and Goliath, isn't it? These small organizations going up against the federal government, but they're driven by their beliefs, that every person has worth.
Do you think they can actually make a difference? I mean, these enforcement efforts can be huge.
That's hard to say. But even if they can only help a few people, it's still important. It's a message of hope, a message of solidarity, especially for those who are feeling scared and alone.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a way of holding the government accountable, too, making sure things are done humanely and legally. Speaking of legal, the Videntis has also learned that some lawyers' groups are getting ready to challenge the legality of these raids.
Sounds like we're heading for a court battle.
Oh, yeah. This could be the first shot in a long fight over immigration in Trump's second term.
And a fight with real consequences for millions of people. It's interesting, though, how both these stories we've talked about today, the immigration debate and these assassination files, they both kind of get at what it means to be a nation,
Yeah, I see that. Big questions. Justice, transparency, accountability. What are our values? This isn't just abstract stuff. This is about the kind of society we want to live in. It really is. And we can't just sit back and watch. We have to be informed. We have to get involved. We have to make our voices heard.
Absolutely. Now, the Videntis has been following another story we wanted to share. It's about, well, tech billionaires and the way they're influencing our culture.
Oh, yeah. This has been getting a lot of attention lately. What's the latest?
It seems some of these billionaires are, well, putting their money behind the anti-woke movement. They say it's about protecting free speech and individual liberty.
This anti-woke thing has been growing for a while, pushing back against political correctness, identity politics, that sort of thing.
Right. And according to our sources, these billionaires think woke culture is actually bad for business.
How so?
They say it stifles innovation, hurts the economy. They say it kills creativity and leads to censorship.
Some people agree with them, others not so much. It's a debate, that's for sure.
It is. Some folks see this as a valid pushback against, going too far with all the woke stuff. Others say it's just a way for the powerful to stay in control and silence anyone who disagrees with them.
I can see both sides of that.
And our investigation shows that some of these billionaires are funding think tanks, media outlets, spreading this anti-woke message.
It's a reminder that controlling information is a powerful thing.
Right.
These guys have the money to really shape the conversation, push their own views.
And we need to be aware of that. We need to think critically about the information we're getting, where it's coming from, what the agenda might be.
Absolutely. Media literacy, critical thinking, those are more important than ever.
Okay, back to politics. The Videntis was at President-elect Trump's rally in D.C. yesterday.
Yeah, the one where he was going to preview his second-term agenda. What was the vibe?
Well, it seems like he's sticking with a lot of the same themes and policies from his first term.
So more of the same, appealing to his base.
Yep. Border security, energy independence, restoring American strength, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And how was the crowd?
Pretty enthusiastic. Seems like his base is still fired up and ready to go.
Well, love him or hate him, Trump is a force to be reckoned with. His second term is bound to be just as eventful and probably just as divisive as his first.
Probably. He did hint at some new things, though, like a plan for a national patriotism curriculum in public schools.
Interesting. Sounds like an attempt to influence how the next generation sees America, its history, and its values.
Yeah, that's going to be controversial. People will be debating whether it's appropriate for the government to be involved in shaping national identity in the classroom.
It shows how these fights over culture and ideology, they're happening everywhere, from the halls of power to our schools.
One more thing about that rally. The Videntis reporters noticed that several top Republicans weren't there.
Really? That's odd. You think there's some cracks forming in their support for Trump?
Some people are saying that. Maybe some Republicans are starting to distance themselves. Maybe they're worried about his rhetoric or that he might be vulnerable in the next election.
Could be. We'll have to keep an eye on that. If Trump starts losing support within his own party, things could get very interesting.
No doubt. It's a reminder that politics is always changing. Alliances can shift quickly, especially when things are this polarized.
Well, as we head into Trump's second term, one thing's for sure, it's going to be a wild ride. Buckle up.
You got that right. And the Videntis will be here for it all, bringing you the analysis and insights you need to make sense of it all.
We all need to stay informed, have thoughtful discussions, and speak our minds. The future is being recited right now, and we all have a part to play.
We've covered a lot today, from the Vatican to Washington, D.C., even those tech billionaires. It's a lot to process.
Yeah, we've been all over the map. And you know what strikes me? It's like all these stories, they're all connected somehow. Like they're all tapping into the same anxieties, the same tensions that are running through our society right now.
You're right. It feels like a clash of worldviews, a battle for the soul of America, maybe even the world. On one side, you've got this push for transparency, this desire for justice. You've got Pope Francis calling for compassion and human dignity.
And on the other side, you've got this wave of nationalism, a pushback against change. You've got a president who's digging in his heels, pushing his agenda no matter how much opposition he faces. It's a recipe for, well, conflict.
Yeah, it feels that way. And it makes you wonder, how do we navigate this? How do we find common ground when it seems like everyone is so divided?
That's the question, isn't it? If I had all the answers, I'd be, well, somewhere else, probably getting paid a lot more money. But one thing's for sure, we can't just sit on the sidelines. We got to be informed. We got to be involved. We got to make our voices heard.
I completely agree. The Videntis has given us a lot to think about. And I hope our listeners will continue to explore these stories, think about what they mean. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just this. Even when things feel uncertain, even when we feel divided, there's always hope. Look at history. We humans, we're resilient. We can change. We can find common ground, even when it feels impossible. We can't forget that. We got to keep learning, keep talking to each other, and keep working towards a better future together.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the news shaping our world. Thanks for joining us here at the Videntis. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.